Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Cook With Me Live. We are in the kitchen together. I'm so excited that you can be doing this with me. And I really hope that if there is anyone else in the kitchen with you today, tonight, whenever you're watching this, that you can let me know in the comments, because I love knowing, especially if the kids can get involved in the kitchen with you. So please let me know where you're cooking from even. I love also hearing all around, whether it's Australia, whether it's North America, please let me know, because it's really good to hear where this group of wonderful kitchen crew is cooking from and creating from. Likewise, I would love for you to share this video and share, I guess, with a friend that you know of that might enjoy this recipe and or just benefit from a little bit less overwhelm that they're feeling maybe in the kitchen space by learning a few quicker ways to do things. So feel free to click that share button, and also, like us on Facebook if you want to help continue the flow of the Cook With Me Live. Today we're making Buddha bowls. Now, one of my favorite meals, although there are many, but Buddha bowls are extremely flexible and extremely delicious and yummy and full of awesomeness and colorful and eat the rainbow, and I could go on and on and on. Now, the idea of a Buddha bowl actually, apparently, came from the concept that as Buddha was sort of practicing like a monk, would take his bowl around to the local villagers, and I guess as their way of contributing to his charity or his work, they would put food in his bowl to feed him, and it would just be whatever they had available that they could spare, that they could share. And so the Buddha bowl concept comes from the idea that it was anything and everything that he ended up being fed with that was on offer from the villagers in this sense. So the idea of a Buddha bowl has now evolved to be a very nourishing, kind of sometimes called as a macro bowl, or there's a lot of different names it can go under, but the idea really in its simplicity is that we're putting a whole bunch of real food, as in whole foods, as in, you know, everything from cooked grains to roasted sweet potato to fresh food to raw food to cooked, you know, extra, basically anything you want that would be considered a real food, whole food, into a bowl. Ideally, it's got a whole bunch of different colors. Maybe there's a bit of sauce on top, maybe not so much, but it's very, very open for customization. So here's one option that I've given you, and it's probably one of my favorite ones for many reasons. One, because I've tried to combine in a very sneaky way the full complement of things that science currently understands is a good idea at a meal. Okay, so we're gonna get our dark leafy greens, we're gonna get a whole bunch of minerals from that dulse I've snuck in, we're gonna get our healthy fats without excess fat, we're gonna be getting our antioxidants, we're getting a whole color of the rainbow. I could keep going on and on and on. So if this could be a meal that you do comfortably, easily pull together once or twice a week, awesome. And it never has to be the same thing twice. So let's hook in. First things first is I'd like to show you how to make the lemon and dill cashew cream, because for me, this just makes the Buddha bowl. And you can buy cashew creams nowadays. You can buy non-dairy cheeses as well. You are gonna pay a little bit more for it. So this is the way that you can make this on your own, make it a little bit more affordable, and also not hesitate so much when the kids fall in love with it and they want to eat the whole bowl. Then you're not worrying about how much you just paid for it if you've purchased it made already. So what I've got here are the cashews. This is the 1.5 cups of dry measure cashews that have been soaking overnight. If you didn't remember to soak them, you can just boil the jug of hot water and pour the hot water over them for about 30 minutes. This is not technically an activation process for these cashew nuts, because the nuts are not, when they're in this form, they're not necessarily inactivatable. That's not a word. You can't really activate them in the technical sense that we are doing with something like an almond. Okay, so in this sense, we're just using it to soften them so that they turn into a nice cream once we put them in the blender. So I'm just going to drain the liquid, soaking liquid from them. Okay. And let's add that to the blender. So if you don't have a high power blender, you just might get a little bit more texture in your dip, which is absolutely fine. You could also do this in a high power food processor as well, such as a Thermomix. And as long as you've soaked them, as long as they've had a chance to really absorb that liquid, then you should still get a really smooth result. So not a huge difference there. Most people wouldn't notice a difference. But one of the secret ingredients is going to be the zest from the lemon. So don't pass this opportunity up, because it is a delicious addition. Particularly, just if you didn't know this little trick already, here's a little trick. The lemon zest is where we get the lemon flavor from. The lemon juice is actually really only contributing acidity and a minor amount of lemon flavor. But really, if you want a dish to taste lemony, you're going to need the zest. So I've got a fancy little zester here. You do not need this. You can just use a fine grater, as in like a cheese grater, for example. But if you do have a machine or a little device or tool like this, I'm just going to grab as much zest as I feel like or want without getting too much of the white stuff underneath. So that white layer, if you were to keep scraping, you'll see the white. That's called the pith, and the pith, P-I-T-H, is the bitter part. So we just want to take the zest, which gives us the lemon flavor. It's also where you get the lemon essential oil from, by the way. Okay, so we're just going to take that to get us the lemon flavor and leave behind that bitterness from the pith. That being said, whenever you're eating an orange or a grapefruit, ideally you eat as much of that pith as you can, because it does have a lot of beneficial components to it, and that bitter flavor is really good for your digestive system. So eating bitter foods, that's why we used to have lemon, lime, and bitters before a meal. Now lemon, lime, and bitters conjures up a sweet drink that you get at the bar. But back in the olden days, good old days, if you will, the lemon, lime, and bitters were actually very bitter, and you'd have a little nip of that before your meal to get your digestive fire ready to digest your food. So it's a really important flavor to have in our diet is the bitter. Okay, now depending on your machine, you might want to chop through this a little bit more, but I'm confident that this high power blender is going to pulverize that to nothing so we don't bite into specific pieces of rind. But otherwise you could just rock chop through that one to break it down a little bit. Okay, and then we need the juice of a lemon. So you're going to need a juicer of some description. Let's get as much juice out of there as we can. If you absolutely love that acidity of the lemon, then you might want to add a second lemon to this one, okay? So I've called for the 2 lemons. This one's a particularly large one and very juicy by the looks of it, so I might only need the 1, but go by taste there. I really like the lemon flavor, so I like to have it quite noticeable in this dish, but you might not. You might just prefer the dill or just the cashew-ness of the dip. So we'll get ourselves, you can even try to get the pulp if you can, because there's no need to have the waste from there. And this can then go into your dishwater to help sterilize, antibacterial, antiviral, all those benefits that we get from the lemon essential oil can go into the dishwater. Okay, so we'll get all the juice, shake it all out, and let's use all the juice from that. Now, if you're not sure, if you think it might be too lemony for you, reserve some till the end. You can always taste it and then add some more, but I love it very lemony, so I'm just going to add that all in straight away. Okay, now the nutritional yeast. Sometimes this recipe that we're making here, people refer to it as cashew cheese. This is the ingredient that makes it a little bit cheesy. So I've called for about 4 tablespoons. Let's just eyeball that one. There's 1 tablespoon, 2, 3, that's about 4. 4 tablespoons is also about 1/4 cup, so that's another little cheat you can use. And then some garlic. Now, if you've got roasted garlic in the fridge already, because you're starting to be a very organized bee in the kitchen, then you might already have that beautiful the whole head roasted garlic in the fridge. And then in that case, you could probably use up to about 4 cloves worth of garlic if it was pre-roasted. But since this is fresh, we're gonna err on the side of caution. Don't wanna blow anyone out of the park here, not even Buddha. And we might only use half of this one because it is kind of a large clove, so that's up to you. The thing to keep in mind with garlic is that when you mix this up and taste it the first time, you probably won't taste enough garlic. Garlic and ginger tend to get stronger as they sit. So tomorrow you will definitely taste the garlic, I promise you, which is an advantage of sometimes making this one in advance. So for the sake of, I guess, not wanting to overdo it, just in case this is quite strong, I'm going to put less than a full clove in, okay, because that was quite a large clove. And I'm going to save that other little bit of a clove for another dish or for my broth bag as well in the freezer. Okay, now a little bit of salt, about a teaspoon. We are going to be relying on this dip as most of our flavor in the Buddha bowl. So it's kind of our dressing, it's kind of our sauce. So we're gonna go probably the full teaspoon, which is about that much. And then we'll need a little bit of water to kind of blend this down with. So the only caution I'll say with the water is to use as little as you possibly can get away with, depending on your machine and depending on how long those cashews have had a chance to soak for. So I usually try to start blending it, see how it goes, and if I need to add a little bit just to make it take action, then we'll do that as we need. Okay, so let's get this one going. So you see how we started to get that convection happening within the cashew cream? That's a good sign, and that means that we're getting that smooth turnover. But we kind of, I like to keep this as thick as I can, knowing that it will thicken up a little bit as it sits. So you might just err on the side of caution a bit. It will probably need to be blended for at least a minute, depending on your machine, maybe a bit longer, just because we want to get rid of some of this extra texture if we can. I like it really creamy smooth. It's up to you. This might be perfectly fine for you if you're used to more of like a cottage cheese texture. But I'm gonna add a touch more water and do that again. Now that's going to be smooth. Did you see how much of that natural convection it had? Here I was waiting for the Thermomix to unravel itself. That's funny. Okay, so we've got this nice creamy smooth texture of our cashew cream. So kind of hard maybe for you to tell that unless you're cooking at the same time as me, and you'll know what I mean. And you'll also be getting the smell-o-vision at the same time, which it is very fresh, very yummy. So test it for its lemoniness. Does it have enough lemon flavor and also acidity for you? If it does, then we're good there. Check it for the cheesiness. You know, do you need to add a little bit more nutritional yeast? The garlic, you want it to be there, but still a bit subtle, knowing that it's going to get stronger as it sits. And could it be a little bit, does it need to be a bit saltier? Knowing that this dip is going to kind of be your dressing throughout the Buddha bowl, and it's then going to need to be a little bit punchier to carry through the Buddha bowl, unless you want to add some extra salt and pepper on top. I feel like some of you are going to be making fun of how I say Buddha bowl, because people have in the past. Everyone has a different way of pronouncing it. Buddha, Buddha bowl. Anyways, it's a bowl full of food and it tastes good, and that's what we're after. Now, the reason why I've said to add your fresh herbs at the end is because if I'd have put them in the blender, we would have just had a nice bright green dip. That's okay too, if you're up for that. If you've got those picky kids that for some reason can detect the color green from a mile away, then you might want to just stir this in separately. Okay, now I've called for dill. I love dill. This is best with dill. I don't have any dill at the moment, but I did have some beautiful, really nice, still waxy coriander from the garden. This is as fresh as it can get. It was literally picked about 20 minutes ago. So, and funny enough, it looks like dill because it's starting to go to seed. So it's very interesting when you start to see the herbs side by side. Somebody probably would have mistaken this for dill, potentially. So this is coriander. I love that flavor as well. So I'm gonna add that instead of dill. Okay, so remember the trick, whenever you've got something long and skinny, cut it in half, double it up on itself, and halve your cutting time. Okay, and then we're just gonna bunch it up, and we just want our tiny little pieces. So whether you're doing this with dill, coriander, basil, parsley, whatever herb you've chosen, and I would recommend one because these are full of nutrients as well as full of flavor. Okay, we really want to finely mince through that so that we don't get big kind of stringy pieces that end up not looking very pretty for someone when they're eating it and being a bit annoying if it gets stuck in your teeth. Okay, so we'll chop through that. Now that might not quite be enough. I've said about half a cup. You could go more than that. I would actually go more than that with dill. Coriander is quite a bit stronger in flavor. So then the trick is we're going to stir that in by hand. Okay, so it's probably easiest to do it in the machine as is. So give that a quick little stir. And that way we don't end up with a solidly bright green dip. It just gives it a little bit of visual interest as well, given that there's pieces rather than a pure green dip. Okay, so let's transfer that out. This is now, if you're making a Buddha bowl for 6, you'll probably use all of this. If you know that you love this already, this would keep in the fridge for a good week or so, given the amount of lemon and lemon rind that we put in here as a preserving agent, as well as the salt. So I would recommend that if you do love it, you might as well make yourself a big batch of it. It's going to fit in your machine, most likely. And then you don't have to go to this effort twice in the period of time that you could have got away with only doing it once. Okay, so we'll get as much of that out of that blender as we can. And don't worry, I will be licking that clean pretty much because it's too good to waste. Use that spatula for what it's worth. Okay, so I don't know if I can really show you that on camera, but we really want to kind of press in, plus I'm left-handed, press in to the bottom of the jug, okay? And you're kind of pushing the edge of the spatula down underneath the blades to get underneath there. And then we just go with a fair bit of pressure around the edges to get that last little bit out. Okay, and there is our lemon and dill, lemon and coriander, cashew cream, AKA cashew cheese. You could take it one step further to make it cheesy by actually adding a cheese rennet or a cheese culture and then letting it sit out overnight, but that's another step beyond today. So that's what we have for our cashew cheese. Okay, so the next step that I want to show you is to do with the kale, and this kale in particular, you may have seen me do if you've watched the kale and herb salad, but it is my favorite way to have kale. And if you're still kind of on the fence about kale, or you're not so sure, or you find it particularly bitter, remember we talked about the bitter flavor before, in that if you kind of have that aversion to bitterness, it could be a sign that you actually need more of it in your life, which you may not want to hear. But here's how you're going to enjoy it. Okay, so with the kale, we want to probably give it a really good rinse or a wash. In this case, I might even, okay, you could get out your big bowl and give it a proper wash. This stuff, I had a look through, it's fairly clean already, so I'm going to do a quick wash on this one. And a bit of a spin cycle. It's not as critical here for you to get out the salad spinner and go to that effort with this one. It is critical for something like a pesto, but in this case, because it's kale, it's extremely what's the word, tough, resilient, durable, something like that. And so even that extra bit of moisture, even while it sits the next day, is probably going to make it taste yummier for most people because it's going to soften it up a little bit. It's not going to become kind of gross soft like lettuce would be if you had dressed it today and eaten it tomorrow. Okay, so I'm just taking the stems off. So you just do that by pinching around the base and dragging the leaves off. Very easy. This is normally fun for the kids to do too, so get them involved. At least maybe they're more likely to try it. And yeah, keep in mind that your palate can change. It absolutely can change. You will find this probably way too bitter. If you find this too bitter, it's probably a sign that you have a bit too much sugar in your diet at the moment. Sorry, hate to break it to you, but that's usually the case. And your taste buds, you get brand new taste buds every single 10 days. Well, actually you get 10% new taste buds every day, which means your taste buds are replaced in full every 10 days. So you can actually change your palate really quickly. And a lot of people that work with me in my Kitchen Reset program actually comment on that they wanted to believe me, but they didn't believe me until they actually had it happen to them. And then they were just amazed that I cannot believe how quickly my palate changed. And now they love this stuff. They love most healthy food. And when someone says, are making you a healthy dish, no longer do they sit there and go, oh great, it's going to taste gross. Now their tongue and their whole kind of psyche craves it. And I hope that you're kind of getting to that point, if not there already, because this is the food that will give you longevity, that will give you disease prevention, that will give you, health, better sleep, easier state of mind, lower levels of mood swings, more clarity of mind, the ability to think straight. This is the stuff, okay? This and all of the, the raw, fresh fruits and veggies that we're going to be incorporating. So all I've done there is I kind of grabbed it into a pretty tight bunch. You can be really rough with kale because it's very, very forgiving. And put it into a nice tight bunch. Now the tighter the bunch you put it in, the easier it is to cut, believe it or not. And then I'm just like trying to shave it as thin as we possibly can, because this is usually how most people are going to love kale, especially if it's their first time having it. So as paper thin as you can. Yes, it might take a little bit longer, but honestly, it makes all the difference in the world for being able to eat a whole bowl of this. And as I probably said in that kale and herb salad Cook With Me live video, I can actually sit down and just eat a whole bowl of this for dinner. My body just craves it, and especially with the nice crunchiness of the cashews. In that case, I just find these flavor combinations go really, really well together. So this whole bunch of kale might look like a ton of food, but you will be amazed how much it shrinks down once we do the massage technique with the olive oil. Okay, so we're getting there. You can tell I need to sharpen my knife. And if you're sitting there with a dull knife, then you're going to probably have sore muscles at this point. So that's a good indicator that you probably need to sharpen your knife too. How's everyone going? You keeping up to me? Send me a little message there. Let me know you're with me on this one. And this is also an ingredient or part of the dish that you could have made the day before. Okay, so all of these components of the dish, ideally, for a Buddha bowl, are already sitting in your fridge. They maybe were made for other dishes or other uses, and you end up pulling your Buddha bowl together with kind of whatever's left, whatever's remaining, and that's sort of true to the essence of the Buddha bowl idea as well. You go with what you have left and what you can give. All right, there we go. Okay, so into a big bowl. This is probably more likely the Buddha bowl than the one I'm going to serve it in, but that's okay. Let's go with that. Okay, now here's a little trick that I didn't describe in the recipe. You could even use a little bit of your cashew cheese as your softener for the kale here. Okay, so the idea of what we're going to do now with the olive oil and the salt's going to help to draw out the moisture from the leaves. So we do need a little bit of extra salt to really soften this down into a nice texture that's a little bit easier to chew. Okay, the olive oil helps with that. You could also use the cashew cream. Now, I have given you an amount for this. It's about 2 tablespoons, but really you can go by feel. So we're just going to kind of, it's a fair, generous drizzle and sort of a generous sprinkling of salt. Okay, and then we massage. And you can put a fair bit of pressure on this too, because like I said, the kale is very forgiving, and what we are trying to do is actually soften it down. We're trying to break the cells down a little bit. It's almost like a form of ceviche. So if you've heard of ceviche in South America, that's the way they cook thinly cut fish or thinly cut meat without any heat. They actually use acid to cook it. So this is kind of another way of doing that with a vegetable, because we're using the salt to actually draw out the moisture, and then we're using the oil to help soften this down. And we're, with the physical action of our hands, we're actually kind of starting to break down those cells, which is beginning the easier digestive process as well for us too. So it's advantageous on lots of levels. Okay, don't waste any kale. All right, now if you were to add a little bit of the cashew cream to that, you would have just added it in while you were massaging it. So I kind of want to preserve it because I love tasting it as a dollop on top. So that's pretty much it. So now we just need to cut up all of our little bits and bobs of veggies. Now, Feel free to get really flexible here. Whichever ones you've got on hand, whichever vegetables you love, you can use. The key here is going to be to cut them in fairly small pieces. Okay, so for the sake of getting a couple different flavors in one forkful at a time, you probably want to cut them not too small, but very much a bite size, a little bit smaller than bite size, so that, like I said, you can get a couple different flavors in one forkful. Okay, so I'll add a few diced tomato pieces. And I suppose if we were doing this in true Buddha fashion, I imagine that it would be really nice if you could make this meal and be very appreciative or grateful or sending a little bit of love into these veggies, knowing that every single cell in each one of these vegetables and every single piece of food that you put into your mouth will in some way, shape or form become one of your cells. And it has been proven in lots of really interesting, fascinating studies just that's actually happening on a cellular level. So please try not to ever prepare food while you're grumpy, unhappy, sad, frustrated, angry, anything like that, because those intentions actually affect the food. They've proven this on multiple studies. Dr. Masaru Emoto did a whole bunch of studies on water crystals to prove this, as well as the studies of Lynn McTaggart. She wrote in a wonderful book called The Intention Experiment, which was such an eye-opener for me. I read that at quite a young age, and it really kind of, I don't want to say shook me, but it really made me think twice, in many cases, about my actions and how my intentions really affected things. And now I'm getting on a bit of a tangent, but might as well because I'm just chopping things, I've actually been told by a couple of people that you can actually have a very healing effect on a person by preparing them a meal and preparing it very consciously, like being present with what you're cooking and preparing it with love. And after reading all those studies and seeing all that evidence, there's no doubt in my mind that there's a lot more truth to that than I think most people are willing to believe. So especially when it comes to a Buddha bowl, I imagine that it would be very fitting if you were to be full of peace and love and maybe gratitude to someone or something in your life while you're doing it. There you go, there's my little rant for the day. Now, carrot. Carrot's tougher, it's crunchier, so do we cut it bigger or smaller? Any guesses? I'll pretend I can hear you. Smaller! So in this case, because it's a harder texture, ideally, for most people, when you bite into it, it's going to be nicer as far as a mouthfeel if we can cut this thinner than the other vegetables, or thin in general. Okay, so this is where it'd be nice to use a mandolin or something like that, but I'm going to do my version of a julienne by cutting thin slices and then chopping through this nice and thin here too. Okay, if you had a mandolin, you could use that. If you had a julienne peeler, you could use that. But we just want these nice thin pieces so that when you bite into a forkful, you're not just getting a huge, chunky, crunchy piece of carrot in one go. You can see the rainbow starting to happen already. This is exciting. Love Buddha bowls. Okay, now beans. Let's incorporate some beans. You don't have to, but it's quite nice. Conveniently out of a can. I know they're out of a can, but they're organic. They're cooked, they're ready to go. So talk about, way better than a protein shake. Open a tin of beans. And if you needed to make mayonnaise, you would have saved that liquid out of the tin because that's your aquafaba. I have found it works with chickpea liquid, it works with mixed bean liquid, and it also works with cannellini bean liquid. So to give that a little bit of rinse. I've got some sauerkraut here. So hopefully you've got some sort of probiotic sauerkraut or kimchi, something like that you could add. Definitely some sprouts. Sprouts are one of the most nutritious, they are the most nutritious foods known to man per calorie. Okay, so if you haven't got sprouts in your life already, let's get that happening. Okay, we'll get this ready to go. And I think we're ready to assemble the Buddha bowl. Half an avocado. I think avocado is pretty critical for my Buddha bowls. Oh, that's not a very nice one. Let's try again. And especially, I guess, now that Buddha bowls have become such a thing, they're coming in all shapes and sizes and forms and you name it. But particularly the original idea behind a Buddha bowl was that all the ingredients were plant-based, according to the sort of do no harm Buddha philosophy. Not that you have to stick to that, but the idea here is that these are all, I guess, items that come from the earth. So if you want to stick to that, great. If not, that's completely up to you. But that's why I find avocado is one of my favorite components of a Buddha bowl, is because it just brings that nice kind of level of creaminess and richness to the dish, in addition to that cashew cream as well. So I'm going to score some slices into the avocado. Notice I'm using the dull edge of this knife, otherwise I might cut through and slice my finger accidentally. So the dull edge. And then we've got our spoon. Okay, now the fun bit. Oh, and I forgot to say, I'm going to be using the already cooked sweet potato. If you haven't got any already cooked sweet potato, you could be maybe getting yourself a little bit organized and set up for Buddha bowls in the future by cooking extra rice or cooking extra millet or quinoa or something else as far as a grain goes, and then freezing it. And if you want to pull together a Buddha bowl, you just quickly take out a frozen chunk of that, put it in a saucepan and just steam it until you can break the chunk apart, and then you can have that in your Buddha bowl, or you could even fry it off a little bit in the frying pan to get those kind of crispy edges. Otherwise, if you've got some leftover stir-fry veggies, or you've got leftover roasted vegetables from a nice big cook-up, for example, on a Sunday roast evening, that's the type of veggies you can use, any vegetable, okay? So in this case, you don't have to do this express just to make yourself a Buddha bowl. It can literally be anything that you've got on hand that needs to get used up. Okay, so find yourself a bowl worthy of your delicious food. And if you are going to be serving this for, more than one person at a time, build them all at the same time. I'd recommend building them into the bowl. Otherwise, you can also prepare yourself your lunch for the next couple of days. If you're not at home for lunch, then build it into a jar. So the small version of this jar, the little 500s work. You could also just build it into a normal Tupperware container and have your Buddha bowl be more of a Buddha square rectangle thing. It'll still look pretty, and it's all about the color and the flavor. Okay, so here's the fun bit. Let's grab a nice big handful of our softened kale, keeping in mind that this will get softer tomorrow. So you could, if you really wanted that to soften down, then tomorrow would be the trick. I'm going to use the sweet potato. Well, I might as well talk about this one too, because I didn't show you this. When I cook my sweet potato, I love doing it with a little bit of coconut oil on top, salt and pepper, and some pepitas. For some reason, the pepitas, when they roast in the oven like this with the sweet potato, A, they don't burn, and B, they just taste amazing. And they normally are done in the same amount of time as a sweet potato. So I add a ton of pepitas to this because I just absolutely love the flavor of that. So why don't we just get in there here. It's all about, remember, sending our intention and our love comes through our fingers. It's the other reason why in India they don't use fork and a knife, because they believe that that's actually an insult to the food. Why wouldn't you want to touch your food? It's your opportunity to send it love, for that food's going to become your body. And I love that thinking. So we should use our fingers more, I believe. Clean, of course. Clean fingers. Okay, now let's arrange the color. So I'm not going to put the carrot beside the sweet potato because that's two orange pieces beside each other. So let's do a little bit of green. Green is usually, well, hopefully, mostly green you've got on your plate. Let's do some nice red beside that. This is how quick and easy it is. So you can imagine if we didn't have to make each of those parts individually, the Buddha bowl could be ready in about 5-10 minutes. Okay, so let's do a little bit of our capsicum. Can't forget some sauerkraut, a little bit of purple beside the yellow. This is just red cabbage that's been turned into sauerkraut with a little bit of salt. I think there might be some spices in this one too, but that's it. That's another process I go over again in the Kitchen Reset program if you want that in more depth. Let's add some mixed beans. I've chosen the mixed beans, give you a bit of different textures, all the different nutrients from choosing the different types of beans, right? There's a reason why they're different in color and in texture and shape, is because they contribute different nutrients. So let's pack a whole bunch of sprouts in there. Yum. Oh no, I need to put the carrot in there, otherwise I'm gonna have carrot beside sweet potato. Carrot, it's a bit much. Talk about eating a rainbow, right? It's so fun to make your food taste or look beautiful first, because we eat first with our eyes. And then let's put ourselves half an avocado at least, these are pretty small, onto this dish. Am I forgetting anything? No, we're good, just the cheese / sauce. See, you gotta have fun. You gotta have fun with your dish. And this could be, okay, so here's another thing. If you've got kids, this is something I used to do a lot when I was working with kids and having them around me a lot more often, is what I called building. You'd have a different name for it each time. So either you were building their bedroom or building a monster or building a castle or something fun that they had to use the food to create the shapes of, and then on their plate, for example, build their bedroom. So they'd make the shapes of a square, they'd build the bed, they put 2 pillows on it, they put a little thing for a lamp or a rug or a toy or whatever. So wherever you wanted to go with that, you could, but the idea is to let the kids play. And then as an adult, let yourself have a little bit of fun with this as well, because it's, I think, really good for you to enjoy that process. Where are we gonna fit the sauce? We've got to zhuzh this up a bit too. That's getting a little bit flat. So that's a very technical term. Let's put it in between here. Oh my gosh, I think my eyes might have been a little bit bigger than my stomach. See how much that's thickened up, actually, just since it was sitting? So that's quite a bit thicker now, and it hasn't even been in the fridge yet. Oh, wow, yum. Lots of sauce. Sprinkle, sprinkle. Maybe a bit of fresh lemon. Don't need to overdo it. Butter balls, it can be anything you like. I really hope you have fun with this, because it is so full of nutrition, but beauty and color and flavor, and it's all your own creation. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next episode of Cook With Me Live.